The scent of gasoline and honest sweat clung to me, a familiar balm. My hands, calloused and ingrained with the dark memory of engine oil, moved with a practiced rhythm, tightening a lug nut on a battered sedan. The clang of metal against metal, the low hum of the radio playing forgotten blues, this was my sanctuary. This was Diego's quiet life, built brick by painstaking brick from the ashes of a past I'd sworn to bury. For 5 years, the only larks I picked were stubborn bolts on rusty engines. The only safe I cracked was a seized transmission casing. The world I knew, the one of hushed whispers and shadowed deals, felt as distant as a star in the midday sky. A framed photograph on my workbench, slightly smudged with grease, showed Sofia, her grin wide and unapologetic, a bright spark in a world I'd tried to shield her from. Her eyes, so much like mine, held a vibrancy I cherished above all else. It was the reason for this quietude, this meticulous crafting of a mundane existence. He was the fragile glass I protected, the only treasure I truly valued. We spoke almost daily, her voice a melody promising normalcy. This morning, however, her usual text, a simple morning big brother, don't work too hard, hadn't arrived. A faint tremor like a distant earthquake rippled beneath my calm. The tremor intensified when a luxury sedan, sleek and out of place, purred to a stop outside my garage. No one ever drove a car like that into my industrial corner of the city. A man emerged, a silhouette against the rising light, dressed in a suit that defied the grime and grit of my world. His movements were fluid, predatory. He didn't need to speak. His presence was a siren wail, a shattering chord in my carefully composed symphony of peace. He simply gestured, a subtle tilt of his head towards the east, towards the darks, towards the promise of a dawn I knew would be anything but serene. My tools felt heavy in my hands, suddenly inadequate. The grease, once a badge of honest labor, now felt like the residue of a forgotten dream. This was it. The past, a coiled viper, had found its way back. I drove my own battered pickup, a stark contrast to the sedan that led the way, through the waking city. The sky began to bleed into shades of bruised purple and fiery orange as I neared the waterfront. The air grew sharp with the tang of salt and diesel. The destination was unmistakable, the shipping container terminal at dawn. A vast, skeletal landscape of stacked steel boxes, towering like forgotten monuments, their corrugated skins reflecting the nascent light in 1,000 fractured angles. Cranes, like prehistoric birds, loomed against the horizon, their mechanical arms poised in silent judgment. I parked beside it, the engine of my pickup, a nervous cough in the pre-dawn quiet. The man in the suit, a collector, I now understood, stood waiting, his face impassive, his eyes like polished stones. Beside him, leaning against a rust-streaked container, was another figure, smaller, draped in a coat that seemed to absorb the light. This second figure held something in their hand, a glint of metal that caught the first rays of the sun. It was Sofia's silver locket, the one I'd given her for her 16th birthday. A tiny engraved compass rose, my breath caught like a snagged fishing line. Diego. The collector's voice was flat, devoid of inflection, a sound carved from granite. Elena Volkov sends him regards. I felt the familiar, unwelcome stir of ice in my veins. Volkov, the Serpent, a name whispered in the darkest corners, a woman whose touch turned gold to ash, loyalty to dust. My fists clenched, the knuckles aching. What does she want? The question was a low growl, barely escaping my throat. The collector took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. Your sister, Sofia, she has accumulated a rather substantial debt, a sum that far exceeds her current means and perhaps yours. He paused, letting the words hang in the frigid air, each one a hammer blow. A sum that, if left unpaid, will have dire consequences for her. My mind raced, a frantic animal trapped in a cage. Sofia, debt. What had she done, my little sister, caught in the coils of a viper like Volkov? It was an unthinkable nightmare. How much? I demanded, my voice raw. The collector merely tilted his head towards the smaller figure, who now stepped forward, the locket glinting. Elena Volkov is a pragmatic woman, the smaller figure said, their voice surprisingly soft, yet edged with steel, a predator's purr. She understands that not all debts can be settled with coin. Some require. a different kind of currency. The figure held out the locket, dangling it between thumb and forefinger. Sofia thought he could play a small game, a little flutter of cards, a dabble in the periphery of Volkov's interests. She lost. Badly. The debt is astronomical, Diego. This wasn't just about money. This was about power, about Volkov asserting her reach. Its acquisition would be beneficial to Volkov's expanding network. My blood hummed with a dangerous energy I thought I'd long since purged. An artifact, an impenetrable vault. This was not a mechanic's job. This was a safecracker's job, my job, the one I'd left behind. You want me to steal it, I stated, not a question, a grim affirmation. To retrieve it, the figure corrected, a faint smile playing on their lips. Consider it a debt transfer. Your sister's life for this. Trinket. Volkov is confident in your particular talents, Diego. She remembers your reputation. The dawn broke fully then, painting the containers in stark relief, but no light pierced the gloom that had descended upon me. Sofia, my sister, her life hanging by a thread, tangled in the ruthless machinations of Elena Volkov. My quiet life shattered. The ghost of my past, a phantom limb I thought I'd severed, throbbed with a terrible, undeniable urgency. There was no choice. For Sofia, I would crack the world open. The biting wind, a cruel sculptor, carved ghosts from the exhaust fumes of my old truck as I navigated the skeletal pathways of the shipping container terminal at dawn. The air tasted of brine and diesel, a harsh prelude to the meeting I dreaded. Each stacked metal box, a vibrant rectangle against the bruised purple sky, seemed to hold its breath, a silent witness to my descent back into the abyss. Sofia. My hands, once deft with wrenches and oil, now trembled with a different kind of tremor, a remembered tension from a life I had painstakingly buried. My headlights cut through the lingering gloom, finally settling on a cluster of figures near a lone, towering gantry crane. Even from a distance, Volkov's presence was a palpable weight. She stood framed by the industrial steel, a silhouette of predatory grace. Another, a lean man with eyes that missed nothing, observed from a slight distance, his posture coiled. My boots crunched on scattered gravel and grit. Every step was a battle against the urge to turn, to flee, to somehow conjure a different reality for Sofia. But there was no other path, not for him. Diego, Volkov's voice, a low purr against the industrial backdrop, carried to me, devoid of warmth, yet laced with an unsettling familiarity. Her eyes, the color of winter ice, fixed on mine, assessing, dissecting. There was no greeting, no pretense of pleasantry. I met her gaze, refusing to flinch, though a tremor ran through my gut. He was a serpent indeed, beautiful and deadly, a creature of calculated strikes. You understand why you are here, she stated, not a question but a pronouncement. A faint smile, devoid of mirth, touched the corners of her lips. Your sister has, a penchant for expensive mistakes. My jaw tightened. How much? I demanded, cutting to the chase. The truth was a bitter pill I was ready to swallow. 1 million, Diego, he said, his voice dropping, each word a stone falling into a deep well. A sum he gambled away, foolishly believing he could outwit my associate. 1 million. It was an astronomical figure, a chasm I couldn't bridge with years of honest labor. My quiet life, my small savings, they were dust against such a mountain. I know I don't have that kind of money, I countered, the desperation a raw edge in my tone. Volkov merely inclined her head, her gaze unwavering. Precisely. But I, Diego, possess a different kind of currency. A skill set, shall we say, that is unique. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air, a noose tightening around my neck. I have a reputation, even after all these years, the ghost who could open anything. My past, the phantom limb, was no longer a ghost. It was solid, palpable, and reaching out to reclaim me. I'm out, I stated, a futile defiance. I'm a mechanic now. A sharp, humorless laugh escaped her lips. A quaint hobby, but my sister's life, Diego, demands a professional, a master, and that, my friend, is what I am. She took another step closer, her presence dominating the vastness of the terminal. The debt is not negotiable, but its repayment can be unconventional. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. What do I want? Her eyes gleamed, reflecting the nascent light of the rising sun. There is an object. A relic, truly. I'd heard fragments, legends, hushed tales among the old hands. A ruby, they said, the size of a pigeon's egg, set within an ancient, intricate golden mechanism rumored to be unbreakable. Impassable, I breathed, the word a cloud of vapor in the cold air. That thing is a myth, and if it's real, it's untouchable. It's not just a safe, it's a fortress. A fortress built by men, Diego, Volkov countered smoothly, and thus vulnerable to the right man. Fail, and I assure you her mistakes will be repaid in blood, not coin. I have other ways of collecting. The threat hung heavy, a leaden weight in the air. I saw Sofia's face, her bright smile, her youthful exuberance now overshadowed by this monstrous debt. The choice was no choice at all. My quiet life, my carefully constructed peace, it was all ash. I was a puppet, dancing on strings held by the Serpent, the eye of Ethelred. The determination I felt was not born of choice, but of absolute necessity. It was a determination forged in the fire of desperation, a promise whispered to the dawn, a vow to save Sofia, no matter the cost to myself. The first light bled across my workshop floor, painting the oil stains and forgotten tools in a bruised purple. It was a cruel dawn, for with it came the stark reality of my undoing. Sofia's face swam before my eyes, the vibrant laugh, the innocent belief in a future untainted by shadows. That future, I knew, was now mine to forge or shatter. The Serpent's venom had seeped into the quiet corners of my life, and the only antidote was a plunge back into the abyss I had so painstakingly escaped. My hands, once adept at coaxing steel doors to yield their secrets, now trembled slightly as I retrieved a worn leather pouch from a cavity beneath a loose floorboard. Inside, a scattering of old, untraceable currency, folded tight, and a burner phone, its SIM card still pristine. These were relics of a life I'd sworn off, emergency anchors for a storm I prayed would never come. The storm had arrived. The air outside tasted of rain and exhaust fumes, a familiar cocktail of urban decay. The city, normally a symphony of waking life, seemed to hold its breath, watching my descent. I navigated the labyrinthine streets, my mind already charting courses, anticipating obstacles, the old instincts stirring like dormant predators. The mechanic was shedding his skin. The safe cracker was waking. My destination was the shipping container terminal at dawn, a place where the world's forgotten secrets often found brief, clandestine sanctuary. The horizon was a smudged line of bruised orange and gray, the sky a vast canvas of impending light. As I approached, the colossal metal boxes rose like silent, rusted mountains, stacked in precarious towers against the burgeoning day. The air here was thick with the brine of the sea and the metallic tang of diesel, a raw, industrial scent that clawed at my memory. Forklifts like mechanical beasts rumbled in the distance, their yellow lights cutting through the lingering mist. It was the old fence, his frame thinner than I recalled, his face a roadmap of hard living, etched with suspicion. There was no warmth, only a weary recognition. I heard you were dead, or worse, honest. Reports were exaggerated, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. The words tasted like ash. This man, he was a ghost from my past, a living embodiment of the choices I'd made and the company I'd kept. To drag his back, even tangentially, felt like a betrayal of my own redemption. What brings a ghost back to the graveyard? He asked, his gaze unwavering, dissecting me. You always wanted out. Now you're back in the mud. I need eyes, I said, cutting to the chase. And hands for something particular. He grunted, a sound of cynical amusement. Particular, that's a Diego word, usually means impossible, dangerous, and likely to get everyone involved buried. It's for my sister, I confessed, the words a bitter draft on my tongue. The lie, the half-truth, felt like a violation. I couldn't tell him the full scope, the Serpent's name, the artifact. Not yet. Not until I knew if he was still trustworthy, if his loyalties hadn't shifted with the tides. His eyes narrowed. Sofia, she always had a knack for trouble, that girl. Big trouble, it seems, if it's pulled you back. He paused, chewing on the inside of his cheek. What kind of particular? A vault, a strong room, something with a pulse. Something ancient, I clarified, choosing my words carefully. Something that moves but isn't alive, heavily guarded, deeply desired by those who shouldn't have it. The old fence's face, usually a mask of indifference, flickered with something akin to concern. Ancient, moving, heavily guarded, that smells like Volkov, a legendary artifact, they call it, vanished centuries ago, now resurfacing, protected by a private consortium, impenetrable layers of tech and muscle, a fortress within a fortress. My stomach tightened. The legend was real. Volkov hadn't exaggerated. Requires precision, stealth, a touch like yours. He eyed my hands, then my face, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. I always were an artist with the quiet work, but this is beyond even my legend, Diego. I need blueprints, I pushed, ignoring his assessment. Security schematics, anything on the movement patterns of the guards, the layout of the place, and tools. Specific tools, not just the usual kit. I need a specialized set. The kind no one makes anymore, the kind only a few ever knew how to use. Nodded slowly, a deep sigh escaping him. I always did ask for the moon. Give me a day. I'll make some calls. My contacts aren't what they used to be, but some doors still creak open for the right coin. Meet me here same time tomorrow. Don't be late, and don't bring any unwanted attention. He pulled a small, intricately carved wooden bird from his pocket, no bigger than my thumb. If I need to send a message, leave this at the base of container 7B. I'll know. He pressed the bird into my palm, its smooth surface cool against my skin. It was a token from our shared past, a forgotten signal. The first ghost had been assembled. The weight of Sofia's future and my own damnation settled heavily on my shoulders. The metallic tang of salt and rust clung to the air, a stark counterpoint to the nascent light bleeding across the eastern sky. The shipping container terminal at dawn was a symphony of industrial giants, stacked like forgotten children's blocks. I stood amidst them, the small, carved bird a cool anchor in my palm. Its smooth wood, worn by countless touches, whispered of a time before the Serpent's coils tightened around my life, before Sofia's reckless gamble. The strategist, my old friend, had vanished as silently as he'd appeared, leaving behind not just a token, but a fresh wave of dread. My breath plumed in the crisp morning air as I walked, my boots crunching on loose gravel. I found the strategist waiting in the cab of a rusted, nondescript van, its engine a low hum. He offered no greeting, only a curt nod, his gaze already fixed on the tablet glowing in his hands. I slipped into the passenger seat, the bird still clutched tight. She wants it by the end of the week, I stated, the words tasting like ash. He didn't look up. Of course. Volkov doesn't operate on if or when. Only now. He tapped the screen, a series of schematics and grainy photographs blooming into view. The target is ambitious. A private collection secured within a renovated underground bunker beneath an old shipping warehouse in the industrial district. Think Fort Knox, but with better art. My gaze sharpened, scanning the images. The bunker entrance, disguised as a loading bay, showed reinforced steel doors, multiple biometric scanners, and pressure plates. Inside, the layout was a maze of laser grids, motion sensors, surveillance cameras. What about the vault itself? I asked, my voice steady despite the knot forming in my gut. That's where it gets interesting, the strategist murmured, zooming in on a specific section. The artifact, a relic called the Serpent's Eye, ironic, isn't it, is housed in a custom-built vault. No digital locks, no conventional tumblers. It's a mechanism designed by a reclusive master, a man who believed in the beauty of pure mechanics. This wasn't a simple safe, and that's where our complication arises. The security detail, specifically the individual overseeing the daily checks on this particular vault, the enforcer. Our paths had crossed once violently, leaving scars on both sides. His presence here wasn't just a complication, it was a personal vendetta waiting to ignite. Volkov knew. She always knew. This wasn't just a heist, it was a test, a punishment, a twisted reunion. He's meticulous, I stated, my jaw clenching, and he never forgets a face or a slight. Precisely, the strategist confirmed, his voice devoid of emotion. He'll be a constant presence, a living tripwire. Any approach will need to account for his unpredictable patrols, his specific habits, and his unique brand of intuition. The weight of the bird in my hand felt heavier, a symbol of a past that refused to stay buried. Sofia's life hung by a thread, and now the man holding the scissors was someone who would relish seeing me bleed. Miles away, in a sterile office overlooking the city's sprawling expanse, Detective Rossi stared at the glowing map on his monitor. The city was a grid of blinking lights, each representing a known associate or recent activity of Elena Volkov's syndicate. His colleague, a young, diligent analyst, pointed to a cluster of new activity. "The pattern is emerging, Detective," the analyst explained, her finger tracing a tight circle on the screen. "Multiple shell corporations, all linked to Volkov, have recently acquired significant assets in the industrial district, specifically old, disused shipping warehouses and their underlying properties." Rossi leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "Warehouses for what? Smuggling, storage." "Unlikely for simple storage," the analyst countered, adjusting her glasses. "The acquisition prices were exorbitant for derelict properties, and the specific cluster. It's all within a 2-block radius of the old Blackwood Industries site. Remember that case? The disappearance of the eccentric inventor, Elias Blackwood, 10 years ago. He was rumored to have built a legendary private vault beneath his workshop." A jolt went through Rossi. Elias Blackwood, the man who crafted bespoke security systems, a recluse who guarded his creations with the fervor of an artist. A mythical gem, wasn't it? Said to be part of an ancient mechanism. "Precisely," the analyst confirmed, her eyes bright with discovery. "And the timing of Volkov's movements. It aligns perfectly with recent intelligence suggesting her interest in high-value, portable antiquities. She's not just acquiring property, she's positioning for a specific target." Rossi straightened, his gaze hardening. Volkov wasn't just moving chess pieces, he was setting up a grand play. And if he was targeting Blackwood's legendary vault, the stakes were impossibly high. This wasn't just about recovering stolen goods, it was about stopping a potential global destabilization. He had to move, and he had to move fast. The Serpent was coiling, and its strike would be swift and devastating. Back in the van, the strategist was outlining potential ingress points, but my mind was a whirlwind of the past and the present. The enforcer, his face, etched with a grim satisfaction, flashed behind my eyes. Volkov had orchestrated this, not just to get the artifact, but to force me into a deadly dance with my own demons. Sofia. Her name was a silent scream in my mind. I had to succeed. I had to outwit the enforcer, bypass a legendary vault, and deliver the Serpent's eye to the actual Serpent. The task was impossible, but failure was unthinkable. My determination, forged in the fires of desperation, hardened into an unyielding resolve. The pre-dawn air at the shipping container terminal bit with an iron chill, tasting of salt and diesel. From my perch atop a disused maintenance shed, wind-whipped and precarious, I watched the world awaken in shades of bruised purple and skeletal gray. Cranes, like slumbering metal giants, began their slow, groaning ascent, their cables singing a mournful tune against the dawn. Below, a labyrinth of stacked steel boxes stretched to the horizon, each one a potential hiding place, a silent tomb. My breath plumed, ghosting against the cold glass of the binoculars. The strategist had provided schematics, a network of lines and arrows charting the expected patrol routes, the known camera placements. But paper plans were a fragile fiction. I needed to see the truth, feel the pulse of the place. My eyes, honed by years of deciphering hidden mechanisms, swept across the colossal yard. The main gate, a fortress of reinforced steel, glowed faintly under the sodium lamps. 2 uniformed guards, their rifles slung with practiced ease, patrolled its perimeter. Standard. My gaze drifted to the fence lines, a double layer of chain link topped with razor wire, interspersed with flickering infrared sensors. A faint shimmer, almost imperceptible, betrayed the presence of laser tripwires. Crisscrossing the narrow gaps between container stacks a recent addition, not marked on the strategist's outdated maps. Volkov hadn't underestimated this target, or perhaps he had simply kept crucial details to herself. My focus tightened on the specific zone the strategist had highlighted, a cluster of older, rust-streaked containers nestled deeper within the terminal, shielded by a newer, high-tech security booth. This wasn't a standard storage unit. The schematics indicated a temporary, reinforced vault disguised within one of the containers, housing the legendary artifact. Through the powerful lenses, I could discern the subtle hum of electromagnetic larks on the heavy steel doors of the designated container. Pressure plates, I suspected, lay beneath the gravel approach, silent sentinels waiting for an errant footfall. Thermal cameras, their lenses like unblinking eyes, were mounted high on adjacent container stacks, sweeping the immediate vicinity in slow, methodical arcs. It was an intricate web, designed not just to deter, but to ensnare. Each layer peeled back revealed another, tighter coil of defense. My mind, the old safecracker's mind, began to hum, dissecting each element, searching for the seam, the flaw, the whisper of a bypass. It parked near a stack of empty flatbeds, obscured from the main security booth's view. My heart gave a sudden, hard lurch. A familiar silhouette emerged from the passenger side, unmistakable even from this distance, the enforcer. His broad shoulders, the way he carried himself with an almost predatory stillness, sent a shiver down my spine. The memory of his grim satisfaction, the casual brutality in his eyes, clawed at my gut. He wasn't supposed to be here, not on this reconnaissance. His role was muscle, intimidation, not meticulous planning. My binoculars locked onto him. He spoke into a comms unit, then glanced around, his gaze piercing, as if he could feel my scrutiny across the vast expanse. Then the driver's side door opened. A man I didn't recognize stepped out. He carried a slim, leather briefcase. They exchanged brief, clipped words, the enforcer's posture rigid, the stranger's coolly confident. The stranger gestured towards the very cluster of containers I had been studying, the temporary vault. He pointed not at the vault itself, but at a specific, older container adjacent to it, one that the strategist had marked as mere inert storage. The enforcer nodded, a grim, humorless gesture. He produced a small, tablet-like device and scrolled through something, showing it to the suited man. The stranger leaned in, his expression unreadable, then tapped a finger on the screen, indicating a particular section. A quick, almost imperceptible exchange of something small and metallic occurred between them before the stranger re-entered his sedan and drove away as silently as he had arrived. My breath hitched. The strategist's maps, Volkov's instructions. The focus had been singular, the artifact in the designated vault. But the enforcer, her trusted, brutal hand, was now meeting with an unknown party, discussing another container, one supposedly empty. This wasn't a simple heist for Volkov. This was a setup, a layered deception. Why the clandestine meeting? Why the interest in the adjacent container? And why was the enforcer, Volkov's personal hound, acting with such secrecy? My mind raced, connecting the dots of betrayal. The enforcer's look in the van, the pressure of Sofia's debt, Volkov's insatiable ambition. Perhaps the artifact was a decoy, or perhaps I was the decoy meant to draw fire while the true prize, hidden in that ordinary container, was retrieved by the enforcer's clandestine associate. The stakes, already impassably high with Sofia's life hanging by a thread, now felt like a noose tightening around my own throat. I was not just facing the terminal's formidable security, but a betrayal from within, a viper's nest where every move could be a fatal misstep. Volkov had dragged me back into this world, not just as a thief, but as a blind pawn. I lowered the binoculars, my jaw clenched, the taste of ash in my mouth. I had to adapt. I had to anticipate, not just the larks, but the lies for Sofia, always for Sofia. Cranes like slumbering metal giants began their slow, groaning ascent, their cables humming a low, mechanical hymn. Below, the labyrinth of steel boxes stretched, an endless, geometric city of potential hiding places, of secrets. My target, a reinforced custom container, nestled deep within a stack, its dull gray paintwork indistinguishable from 1,000 others, pulsed with a silent gravity. Sofia's life hung in the balance, a fragile thread woven into the unforgiving fabric of this impassable task. Determination, cold and sharp, was my only companion. My descent was a shadow's ballet, a controlled fall through the skeletal lattice of a gantry, my specialized climbing gear whispering against the cold metal. Each foothold, each handhold, was a memory of countless other climbs, other impassable entries. The ground met my boots with a muted crunch of gravel and grit. The first layer of defense was the most basic: human eyes. A lone security guard, a hulking figure with a flashlight beam that cut lazy arcs through the gloom, patrolled a perimeter far too wide for his singular vigilance. He was a creature of habit, his pace predictable, his pauses timed. I had studied him, charted his every step on the grainy surveillance feeds Volkov's people had provided. The true challenge began with the internal security. The specific container I sought was part of a larger, sealed block, guarded by an intricate web of laser tripwires, their invisible beams mapping a deadly grid. My goggles, fitted with thermal and infrared filters, painted the air with crimson lines, a silent warning. I moved through them, a practiced contortionist, my body bending, twisting, and sliding with an almost unnatural fluidity. One misplaced elbow, one hurried breath, and the silent alarm would scream its betrayal. I cleared the grid, my muscles aching, but the surge of adrenaline was a potent elixir. My target container was a beast, its seams welded shut, its single access panel a fortress unto itself. This wasn't just a lark, it was a layered defense, a mechanical onion designed to frustrate and delay. I knelt, my kit spread on a clean cloth. First, the magnetic resonance scanner, a device I'd spent months calibrating. It hummed softly, mapping the internal workings of the vault door, projecting a holographic schematic onto a small screen. My fingers, accustomed to the delicate dance of tumblers and pins, found purchase. The air was still, heavy with the scent of ozone from the scanner. I worked with a surgeon's precision, each tool a natural extension of my will. A tiny click, then another, barely audible over the distant clang of metal from another section of the terminal. The first deadbolt slid back with a sigh. Then the unexpected. A low, rhythmic thump-thump-thump vibrated through the steel floor, not the distant cranes, not the guard. It was closer, a heavy bootfall. I froze, my hand hovering over the second lock. My breath hitched. The rhythmic thudding grew louder, approaching my specific stack of containers. This was not on the schematics. This was not part of the predictable routine. A new variable, a random patrol, perhaps a colleague of the first guard, making rounds at an unscheduled hour. The thudding stopped. A deep cough, then a low whistle shockingly close. A sliver of light, not from a flashlight, but from a headlamp, cut through the narrow gap between two containers, dancing across the very spot where I'd just been working. My heart, a relentless drum, threatened to betray me. I could feel the vibrations of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, just on the other side of my steel wall. The air felt thick, charged with potential discovery. A grunt, a shift of weight. Then a voice, gruff and indistinct, speaking into a radio. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was relaxed, casual. He wasn't looking for me, he was just there. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps resumed, slowly receding into the metallic maze. I waited, counting to 50, then 100 before daring to move. My hands trembled slightly as I resumed my work, the near miss an icy reminder of the fragility of my plan. I pushed the tremor aside, focusing. The second lock, a digital keypad hidden beneath a false panel, required a different kind of finesse. I bypassed the circuit, soldering tiny wires, my eyes straining in the faint glow of my headlamp. The numbers flickered, then held. A soft chime confirmed my success. 2 down. The final barrier was a pressure-activated internal mechanism, a relic of an older, more brutal era of security. My scanner, though excellent, hadn't quite captured its full complexity. It wasn't just about disarming it, it was about understanding its logic. I found the hidden release, a lever disguised as part of the container's frame, and with a grunt, it gave way. The air inside was stale, metallic. My headlamp pierced the gloom, raking across empty shelves, dusty crates, and then the event. In the center of the container, bathed in the narrow beam of my light, sat not the legendary artifact I'd envisioned, but a single heavy-duty case, secured with multiple clasps. And next to it, on a small makeshift stand, was an old-fashioned mechanical ticking timer, its red numbers glowing faintly, 000547. 5 minutes. My breath caught. This was not the plan. This was not the artifact, or was it? My eyes darted around, searching for an explanation, for a sign. And then I saw it, tucked beneath the timer, a crisp white envelope sealed with a familiar ornate wax stamp. A serpent coiled around a stylized V, Volkov's personal mark. My hands, which had been so steady moments before, now fumbled as I tore it open. The game has merely begun. This is merely the key. The true prize awaits where the sun first kisses the city's heart. I have 5 minutes to understand what I truly hold and to decide if I am worthy of the hunt. Fail and Sofia pays the price. My old friend, E. The reveal hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't the heist. It was a twisted prelude, a cruel test. The artifact wasn't here. This case, this ticking timer, was just the first move in a much larger, far more dangerous game. And the mention of my old friend, E. It twisted a knife in an old wound, a name I hadn't heard in years, a ghost from a life I'd sworn to bury. Elena wasn't just a ruthless syndicate leader. He was playing a personal, elaborate, terrifying game. My plan, so meticulously crafted, had just unraveled into a tangled knot of uncertainty, betrayal, and a ticking clock. The shipping container terminal at dawn, once a mere backdrop, now felt like the very edge of a precipice. I looked at the timer, then at the heavy case, then back at the letter. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to reevaluate everything, to accept the crushing weight of a betrayal that went deeper than I could have imagined. The pre-dawn chill at the shipping container terminal bit deep, a cruel kiss of salt and steel. Mist, heavy and grey, clung to the corrugated flanks of stacked giants, blurring the edges of a world waking to industry's hum. My breath plumed, a fleeting ghost against the pale smear of coming light. This place, a labyrinth of rust and silent promise, was supposed to be the end of the first act, the delivery point for the test case I'd wrestled from the vault. Yet a gnawing unease, cold as the iron deck beneath my boots, had coiled in my gut since the mention of E. I moved between the towering blocks, the air thick with the scent of diesel and the distant shriek of gulls. The case, weighty and inert, was strapped to my back, a silent burden. My contact, a burly figure known only as the dispatcher, was meant to be waiting by container C-17. But C-17 stood solitary, its doors firmly sealed, no dispatcher in sight. Only a single black sedan, windows tinted like obsidian, idled 20 yards away, its engine a low thrum against the terminal's vast quiet. No one else. This felt wrong. As I neared the sedan, its rear window purred down, revealing not the dispatcher's familiar, scarred face, but the cool, predatory gaze of the syndicate's enforcer, a woman whose movements were as fluid as a viper's strike. His lips, painted a stark crimson, curved into a mocking smile. "Diego," he purred, the sound slicing through the crisp air. "So glad I could make it. Elena sends her regards." My hand instinctively went to the hidden blade in my sleeve. Where's the dispatcher? And where's my sister? The words were ice, betraying none of the inferno roaring within me. The revelation from the previous night, that this was merely a prelude, had sharpened my senses, honed my suspicion. The enforcer's smile widened, devoid of warmth. The dispatcher had other engagements. As for my sister, Sofia, she's been moved. Our employer decided a change of scenery was in order. A more secure location, shall we say. A little added motivation for I, perhaps. She gestured to the back seat where a heavy, ornate wooden box, intricately carved with mythical beasts, sat on display. It was the legendary artifact, the one I was meant to steal. Not the case on my back, but this. The real prize, Diego, and I, my friend, are going to help us retrieve it. This wasn't a handoff. It was a brazen re-recruitment, a cruel twist of the knife. Volkov wasn't just testing me. He was playing me for a fool, using Sofia as an ever-tightening noose. The enforcer continued, her voice dripping venom. "The case you carry, a trifle. The real artifact, as you see, is already in our possession, but it requires a particular touch. A touch only you possess, Diego. A touch to disarm its final, most cunning defense. And if you refuse, Sofia's new secure location will become permanent." My world narrowed to the enforcer's cruel eyes and the artifact in the sedan. Betrayal. It resonated like a hammer blow against my skull. Volkov hadn't just double-crossed me. She'd leveraged Sofia again, after I'd already risked everything. A fierce, desperate resolve solidified within me. I wouldn't just deliver, I would take. "Open the trunk," I answered, my voice low, strained. "Let me see Sofia, then we talk about your particular touch." The enforcer chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Clever, Diego, but no, we have a schedule. The artifact is here in this terminal for a reason. Its final mechanism is linked to a specific environmental signature, a unique resonance only found in a few places globally. This terminal at this precise hour is one of them. You will disarm it, or Sofia pays the price." She gestured with her chin towards a distant, larger container, its side painted with a faded shipping logo. "It's in that container. Your new assignment, Diego, is to get it out, unharmed." My mind raced, sifting through possibilities. The true artifact was here, likely in that container she pointed to, but she already had it. No, that didn't make sense. If they had it, why me? Unless the box in the car was a decoy or a component. "The final mechanism," she'd said. It meant the artifact was still protected, and Volkov needed my specific skills, not just muscle. This was a trap, a forced collaboration, but it also presented an opportunity. If I was to save Sofia, I had to play along, at least for now, but my game would be different. "Give me the tools," I demanded, a tremor of fury beneath my controlled facade. "And tell me which container." The enforcer smiled, a flash of white teeth. "Now we're negotiating. Get in." As I moved towards the sedan, my eyes scanned the terminal, picking out details. A security camera, half obscured by a stack of lumber. A forklift, keys dangling from its ignition. And then, a glint of light from a distant observation tower, silhouetted against the nascent sun. A familiar silhouette. Detective Rossi. Rossi was here, at the shipping container terminal at dawn, just as Volkov's enforcers were revealing their true hand. This wasn't a coincidence. Was he trailing me? Or was he here for the artifact too? The stakes had just multiplied, the board suddenly littered with unseen players. I needed to move, and move fast. The ornate box sat between us, exuding an almost palpable aura of ancient power. My fingers, calloused from years of mechanics and less honest work, traced the intricate carvings. This was it, the real deal. "The container is for B Delta," the enforcer stated, her voice sharp, cutting through my thoughts. "It's secured with a biometric lock and a sonic field. My task is to bypass both, retrieve the artifact, and bring it back here. I have 20 minutes before the field destabilizes and the artifact becomes unusable. 20 minutes. With Rossi potentially closing in and Sofia's life hanging by a thread, this wasn't a heist, it was a death sentence, but I was Diego, and I had a sister to save. My eyes met the enforcer's, a silent promise of retribution passing between us. I would retrieve the artifact, yes, but I wouldn't be bringing it back to her, not ever. The game had changed, and this time I was playing for keeps. My escape, desperate and violent, would begin now. The biting wind off the water was a cruel awakening, carrying the metallic tang of the sea and the distant screech of gulls. I stood at the edge of the shipping container terminal at dawn, the world a canvas of slate gray and nascent orange, where the first sliver of light bled across the horizon. Towering stacks of rusted metal boxes formed a labyrinth around me, casting long, fractured shadows that stretched like grasping fingers. Air smelled of diesel and damp concrete, a fitting aroma for a final act. In my hand, the artifact felt heavier than its weight, a cold, smooth stone of intricate design. It hummed with a subtle energy, a silent testament to the impossible task I had just completed. But the true weight was the promise I carried for Sofia. A sleek black vehicle, impossibly silent, glided into the clearing. Its headlights, like predatory eyes, cut through the gloom. Elena Volkov emerged, a silhouette of calculated power, flanked by her two enforcers. Her movements were fluid, predatory. My gaze swept past her, searching. And then I saw her, huddled in the back of the vehicle, her face pale, eyes wide with a fear that mirrored my own. Sofia, my sister, alive. Volkov's lips curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. Diego, punctual as always. I had a feeling I wouldn't disappoint. Her voice, a silken whip, cut through the pre-dawn quiet, offering. I stepped forward, each stride deliberate, conscious of the enforcer's gazes, the subtle shifts in their stance. She first. My voice was a low growl, raw with exhaustion and a simmering fury. Volkov chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. Impatience, my friend, is a weakness, but for I, a concession. She gestured to one of her enforcers. He opened the rear door of the vehicle. Sofia stumbled out, her eyes larking onto mine, a silent plea passing between us. I wanted to run to her to shield her, but I held my ground. Not yet, not until this was done. The artifact, Diego, Volkov pressed, his gaze now fixed on the object in my hand. My patience, unlike yours, has limits. I extended my arm, the artifact resting on my palm. Volkov approached, her eyes devouring the relic. She took it, her fingers brushing mine, a fleeting contact that felt like static electricity. She turned the artifact over, inspecting its intricate carvings, its polished surface. A flicker of satisfaction crossed her face. "Exquisite," she murmured, a genuine note of pleasure in her voice. "Truly a masterpiece. My collection will be complete." "Is it?" I inquired, a challenge in my tone. She looked up, a hint of suspicion entering her gaze. "What is that supposed to mean?" "This artifact," I began, my voice steady. "It's more than just a pretty bauble. It's a key. A very specific key." My eyes met hers, holding. "And keys have locks and secrets." Volkov's smile tightened. "I am aware of its purpose, Diego. Don't presume to lecture me on my acquisitions." "Perhaps," I continued, ignoring her veiled threat, "but did I know its true purpose, its hidden function?" I watched her closely, her brow furrowed, a tiny crack in her composed facade. "This piece, Elena, isn't just a symbol of power. It's a conduit, a transmitter." Volkov stiffened, her gaze snapping back to the artifact in her hand. A faint, almost imperceptible red light pulsed from a seam I had meticulously created, a seam that had not existed before. "What have you done?" she hissed. "This artifact isn't just about having power. It's about broadcasting it, and when it broadcasts, it doesn't discriminate." The red light intensified, throbbing rhythmically. Her enforcers tensed, their hands going to their weapons, but they were unsure what to do. "That signal," I explained, my gaze unwavering, "it's a beacon. A very loud, very public beacon. It's broadcasting my location, my presence, and everything I've ever done to anyone listening. And believe me, Elena, a lot of people are listening, especially one very persistent detective." Volkov's face contorted, a mask of fury replacing her usual composure. She understood. I had not just delivered the artifact. I had weaponized it against her. The legend wasn't just about its beauty or its symbolic power. It was about its ability to expose. My hours spent meticulously disassembling and reassembling the mechanisms within, understanding its true, hidden purpose had paid off. I hadn't stolen it. I had diffused it and then re-engineered it into a trap. "I fool," she roared, her voice echoing off the containers. "I've ruined everything." "No," I corrected, a grim satisfaction in my tone. "I've saved everything, starting with my sister." Just then, the distant wail of sirens pierced the pre-dawn air, faint at first, then growing rapidly louder. Volkov's head snapped towards the sound, her eyes wide with disbelief and a sudden realization of her predicament. The enforcers exchanged panicked glances. Rossi. I had bought myself 20 minutes, and then I had given him a direct invitation. "Get her," Volkov shrieked, pointing at Sofia, but her enforcers hesitated, torn between obeying their leader and the rapidly approaching threat. The sirens were almost upon us, a cacophony of flashing lights now visible in the distance, bouncing off the metal containers. "Sofia," I yelled, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Run, now." She didn't hesitate. With a burst of speed, she bolted, disappearing into the maze of shipping containers, a ghost in the dawn light. My heart clenched, but a sliver of hope ignited. He was free. Volkov, seeing her prize ruined and her escape route dwindling, threw the now brightly glowing artifact to the ground in a fit of rage. It shattered, the red light dying, but the damage was done. The sirens were deafening now, police vehicles skidding to a halt at the entrance to the terminal. "This isn't over, Diego," Volkov snarled, his eyes burning with a promise of future vengeance. "I'll pay for this." But his words were lost in the blare of megaphones and the shouts of the approaching officers. She and her enforcers were surrounded, their escape blocked. I watched as the first uniformed figures swarmed the area, their weapons drawn. I didn't wait for the inevitable. My purpose here was complete. My gaze swept one last time towards the direction Sofia had fled. He was gone, safe. That was all that mattered. I was a phantom, a whisper in the wind, leaving the chaos behind. The metallic tang of the sea still hung heavy, but it no longer felt like a prison. I was free. Sofia was free. The path ahead was uncertain, unwritten, but it was mine to forge. And for the first time in a long time, the horizon felt not like an ending, but a new, hopeful beginning.